Okay. So today, today we're going to talk about culture. I thought culture is an interesting topic because culture is really the rules that help us navigate life and give us like our default programming. And so I have a couple of videos and we can watch those and then we'll just chat about them. But first off, let's just start with culture. What do you guys think culture is? Because I think it's different for everybody. Yeah, what is culture?
It's the societal norms that shape a population.
Okay, societal norms that shape the population.
It sounded very Webster.
It's like things that are, I guess, like handed down in traditions that are kind of embedded in you from when you're little.
Yeah. Traditions handed down.
Gary, what's culture?
What is a culture?
What is it?
You know,
Not the kind that takes me food.
I'm trying to explain culture without using the word culture. Whenever I think it's culture is things made up of activities and historical meaning to a group of people.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. You got anything, Chris? Culture.
I mean, just everything is culture related, like music, art. I guess,
Okay.
like music and art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely music, art, food, festivities,
values.
values.
I was in a city full of culture in Sweden, New Orleans.
Okay.
Branch fresh off this.
That is
A
called
pure
culture.
essence of culture.
The very much culture.
Yeah. So, how do you know where one culture begins and one culture ends? Because we have cultures, broader kind of thought patterns or behavioral patterns, but we also have, we have a culture here in Elixir. There's a culture here in this building. When people walk into it, you kind of know what to expect. People are friendly, open, talk about all kinds of stuff.
I
It's
think
not like that everywhere.
that's a subculture of like, so we have American culture and then there's the subculture which is like Louisiana or New Orleans, that's very specific, and then there's even, more niche subculture, which is like those individual tiny communities culture inside of that subculture. I don't know what the word is for that, but I feel like it's an endless category.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wanted to explore culture a bit, because culture is really in everything and it's programming us all the time. Like shame. Hi. Welcome. But culture is everywhere, and for example, shame only works if there's a cultural rule, right? That's where shame comes from. You're not doing the thing I think you're supposed to do because my culture said that you're supposed to do this. And that could be a cultural practice within this building, it could be a cultural practice within the United States, it could be a cultural practice from your religion, it could be a cultural practice from anything. It could just be a belief that you hold. But that translates into a rule that then can, and often will, be violated. And we get into a lot of difficult parts because we don't understand how our culture has shaped our values and how our culture has shaped our beliefs and how violations of those violate our culture, which is our norm. And then we're looking at people going, why are you doing that? You shouldn't do that. Right? So there's a lot to explore within culture. So this is going to be a couple of weeks of exploring this from a couple of different perspectives. But I think it's so varied that we'll have lots to talk about. So before we play the first video though, why don't we introduce ourselves? We have a new face.
You've been here before, right? I just forgot
Okay.
your name.
Danielle.
Danielle.
Danielle, okay, that's right. All right.
Is Emerald coming, do you know?
I don't know. I haven't talked to her.
Oh.
Yeah, it's,
I think that you've been.
okay, that's right.
I'm Sam.
Yeah, we can just say our names so everybody gets.
I'm Jill.
Chris.
Easier.
Peter. Okay. All right. So I have a video that first is going to talk about culture in a, like, really give us a definition of what we're talking about and how to kind of look at this, and then we'll go from there. I found this video really enlightening.
Are you more likely to spend your free time at a football game or at a modern art show? Do you watch NCIS or True Detective? Do you wear JCPenney or J. Crew? These distinctions and many more like them are just one way of distinguishing between cultural patterns in terms of social class. Because yes, class affects culture and vice versa. So one way of looking at culture is by examining distinctions between low culture and high culture. And okay, yeah, those are kind of gross sounding terms. But I want to be clear. High culture does not mean better culture. In fact, so-called low culture is also known as popular culture, which is exactly what it sounds like. Low or popular culture includes the cultural behaviors and ideas that are popular with most people in a society. High culture, meanwhile, refers to cultural patterns that distinguish a society's elite. You can sort of think of low culture versus high culture as the People's Choice Awards versus the Oscars. The Hunger Games probably weren't going to be winning Best Picture at the Oscars, but they were massive blockbusters, and the original movie was voted the best movie of 2012 by the People's Choice Awards. By contrast, the winner of Best Picture at the Oscars that same year was The Artist, a black and white silent film produced by a French production company. Very different movies, very different types of culture. Now, you can also look at how different types of cultural patterns work together. The Hunger Games and The Artist may appeal to different segments of society, but ultimately, they both fit into mainstream American media culture. Mainstream culture includes the cultural patterns that are broadly in line with the society's cultural ideals and values. And within any society, there are also subcultures. Cultural patterns that set apart a segment of society's population. Take, for example, hipsters. They make up a cultural group that was formed around the idea of rejecting what was once considered cool in favor of a different type of cultural expression. Yeah, your beard or your fixed gear bike or your bleached blonde hair and your thick frame glasses, they're all part of the material culture that signifies membership in your own specific subculture. But who did
Dunkin's $6 meal deal. Get a medium coffee, 6 crispy hash browns, and a bacon.
She talks fast.
She does.
I mean, the whole hipster thing has gone pretty mainstream at this point. Typically, cultural groups with the most power and societal influence get labeled the norm, and people with less power get relegated to subgroups. The US is a great example of this, in large part because of our history as a country of immigrants. The US is often thought of as a melting pot, a place where many cultures come together to form a single combined culture. But how accurate is that? After all, each subculture is unique, and they don't necessarily blend together into one big cohesive culture just because we share a country. And more importantly, some cultures are valued more than others in the US. For example, everyone gets Christmas off from school because Christian culture holds a privileged role in American society. That might not seem fair if you're a member of a subculture that isn't folded into mainstream culture. So it's not really a melting pot if one flavor is overpowering all the other flavors. And this brings me to another subject: how we judge other cultures and subcultures. Humans are judgmental, we just are. And we're extra judgmental when we see someone who acts differently than how we think people should act. Ethnocentrism is the practice of judging one culture by the standards of another. In recent decades, there's been growing recognition that Eurocentrism, or the preference for European cultural patterns, has influenced how history has been recorded and how we interpret the lives and ways of people from other cultures. So what if, rather than trying to melt all the cultures into one, we recognize each individual flavor? One way to do this is by focusing research on cultures that have historically gotten less attention. For example, Afrocentrism is a school of thought that recenters historical and sociological study on the contributions of Africans and African Americans. Another option is expanding and equalizing your focus. Instead of looking at behavior through the lens of your own culture, you can look at it through the lens of multiculturalism, a perspective that, rather than seeing society as a homogeneous culture, recognizes cultural diversity while advocating for the equal standing of all cultural traditions. In this view, America is less a melting pot and more like a multicultural society. Still, the ways in which cultures and subcultures fit together, if at all, can vary depending on your school of thought as a sociologist. For example, from a structural functionalist perspective, cultures form to provide order and cohesiveness in a society. So in that view, a melting pot of cultures is a good thing. But a conflict theorist might see the interactions of subcultures differently. Prioritizing one subculture over another can create social inequalities and disenfranchise those who belong to cultures that are at odds with the mainstream. It's hard to encourage individual cultural identities without promoting divisiveness. In the US, at least, it's a constant struggle. But sometimes, subgroups can be more than simply different from mainstream culture. They can be an active opposition to it. This is what we call a counterculture. Countercultures push back on mainstream culture in an attempt to change how a society functions. Let's go to the thought bubble to take a trip back to one of the biggest countercultural periods of the 20th century, the 1960s. In the United States, the 1960s were rife with countercultures. It was a time of beatniks and hippies, of protests against the Vietnam War, and of protests for civil rights and women's liberation. These movements were often led by young people and were seen as a rebellion against the culture and values of older generations. This was the era of free love, where people embraced relationships outside of the traditionally heterosexual and monogamous cultural norms. Drug use, especially the use of psychedelic drugs, was heavily associated with this subculture and was celebrated in its popular culture. Think Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds or the Beat authors' books about acid trips. But this counterculture was also a pushback politically against mainstream culture. Many cornerstones of the politics of the American left have their origins in the counterculture of the 1960s. Anti-war, pro-environmentalism, pro-civil rights, feminism, LGBTQ equality. From the Stonewall riots to the Vietnam War protests, 60s counterculture was where many of these issues first reached the public consciousness. Thanks, Thought Bubble. So, countercultures can often act as catalysts for cultural change, especially if they get big enough to gain mainstream support. But cultures change all the time, with or without the pushback from subcultures and countercultures. And different parts of cultures change at different speeds. Sometimes we have what's called a cultural lag, where some cultural elements change more slowly than others. Take how education works, for example. In the US, we get the summer off from school. This is a holdover from when this was a more agricultural country and children needed to take time off during harvest. Today, there's no real reason for summer vacation other than that's what we've always done. So how does cultural change happen? Sometimes people invent new things that change culture. Cell phones, for example, have revolutionized not just how we make phone calls, but how we socialize and communicate. And inventions don't just have to be material. Ideas, like about money or voting systems, can also be invented and change a culture. People also discover new things. When European explorers first discovered tomatoes in Central America in the 1500s and brought them back to Europe, they completely changed the culture of food. What would pizza be without tomatoes? A third cause of cultural change comes from cultural diffusion, which is how cultural traits spread from one culture to another. Just about everything we think of as classic American culture is actually borrowed and transformed from another culture. Burgers and fries, German and Belgian respectively. The American cowboy, an update on the Mexican vaquero. The ideals of liberty and justice for all enshrined in our founding documents, heavily influenced by French philosophers like Rousseau and Voltaire, and British philosophers like Hobbes and Locke, as well as by the Iroquois Confederacy and its ideas of representative democracy. Whether we're talking about material culture or symbolic culture, we're seeing more and more aspects of culture shared across nations and across oceans. As symbolic interactionists see it, all of society is about the shared reality, the shared culture that we create. As borders get thinner, the group of people who share a culture gets larger. Whether it's the hot dogs we get from Germany or the jazz and hip hop coming from African traditions, more and more cultures overlap as technology and globalization make our world just a little bit smaller. As our society becomes more global, the questions raised by two of our camps of sociology, Structural functionalism and conflict theory become even more pressing. Are the structural functionalists right? Does having a shared culture provide points of similarity that encourage cooperation and help societies function? Or does conflict theory have it right? Does culture divide us and benefit some members of society more than others? In the end, they're both kind of right. There will always be different ways of thinking and doing and living within a society, but culture is the tie that binds us together. Today we learned about different types of culture, like low culture and high culture. We looked at different ways of categorizing cultures into subcultures. We contrasted two different ways of looking at cultural diversity, ethnocentrism and multiculturalism. We discussed the role of countercultures and explored how cultural change happens. And lastly, we looked at a structural functionalist and a conflict theory perspective on what cultures mean for society. Crash Course Sociology is filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney studio in Missoula, Montana, and it's made with the help of all...
Okay.
She does talk fast.
She did.
She was talking really fast.
Are you...
Yeah, that was a lot of information.
I think each one of those could have been its own video.
Right?
What?
Each one of the
The bullet points.
one was could have been its own video.
Oh yeah,
She
yeah.
just zipped through it though.
Yeah, so she zipped through a lot of those, but I hope that gives us a better understanding of like culture for us to discuss. Because there's a lot of things that she mentioned, like she said high and low culture. I learned that as high context and low context culture. But it was a little different for what I learned. A high context culture is something like Japanese, where they have a lot of societal rules. So there's lots to learn to function as a Japanese person in society, whereas low context cultures like the US, there's not so many rules and norms to our behavioral patterns. Not to say that we can't still be very, use a stigmatized lens when we are doing things. We can all be equally biased in our assertions. But anyways, what came up from that video? Anything come up? Was it too fast?
It was pretty fast, but I like how it's basically she's just rehashing that American culture is borrowed. I like that. It is. It's borrowed and reshaped and sold as something new.
Well, and I think, American culture has evolved. Like, I think originally the American culture was pretty strict, like very rule-based and I forget the religion that was originally brought over here, but, Protestant, yeah. It was very strict.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's just slowly adding in people from all over the world into the country, accepting different things and just kind of lessen. The culture is like not as strict in most society, most of society. But it didn't start off that way. It's just evolved or devolved, however you look at it, into what we're doing now.
Yeah. Well, and I think there were interesting points that she made about American culture, like, cowboys, getting that from Mexico, and, tomatoes obviously came from Europe, and so that was like more of an Italian thing that came over here. But if you keep going back, the interesting thing about culture is that nobody can claim culture. If you keep going back, every culture bleeds into every culture, because if you look at how world history has focused, it was, big empires at the time that would take over smaller empires. And so they would come, wipe out this empire, let's say the Greeks. The Greeks came in and they pretty much finished off the Egyptians at the time and took over Egypt. And then the Romans came in, take over for the Greeks. And then the English come in and take over for, the Romans. And everything keeps disseminating. And, there was in the early human history, the thought process was, we don't like what you do, so we're just gonna kill all of you and destroy all of your stuff, and you're just going to have to assimilate into our culture. And that was how a lot of like ancient wars went. But over the periods, people realized like, oh, just making them take on our culture is not necessarily a good thing. Because then we have riots and we have lots of angry discourse related to that. And in order for us to all be cohesive, it might be better for you to keep your culture. And so they started keeping like temples, especially when it was around religion. They started keeping those unharmed. And even like Genghis Khan, who was known as one of the greatest conquerors in world history, he valued that aspect of culture, which is one of the reasons that made him so, well, that allowed him to conquer so many different territories, is because he would just let people be who they were. He accepted all religions. He liked to learn from every religion. And so every religion was accepted in their, in like the Mongol culture. They had their own like religion where they would actually go to like mountaintops to worship their deities, but they blended it. And so really the US is a modern, more extreme version of cultural merging, or you could say melting pot kind of analogy. Because we're not being conquered by other people and trying to figure out how our culture assimilates into this culture. You know, they're bringing their culture here, fully intact, and then they're trying to mingle with everybody else. And you know, that creates swaths of like, you know, like Koreatown, you know, down in Houston, where there's a lot of Korean people that reside in that area because that's the area where they feel most comfortable, right? You move next to more Korean people, there's more Korean foods, there's more Korean options, things like that. But eventually, over time, all of that is going to just melt into everything else. You know, we already have fusion foods, but pizza's, you know, a fusion food in and of itself. And things are just going to keep going to evolve and evolve and evolve until the lines between cultures become less and less, and that gets us more to the like cultural appropriation and things like that, where, you know, because the lines are so blurred now, you can take a specific aspect of a different culture and say, hey, look, I invented this thing. And that to me is cultural appropriation. So in thinking about culture and thinking about yourself, because this is really about self-exploration, I want you to think about the cultures that you grew up in. Because, again, there's not just one culture. You didn't just get American culture. You got a subculture, maybe many subcultures, right? Maybe you hung out with the emo kids, or the nerd kids, or the jocks, or whoever, right? Going through school. That's a culture in and of itself. So in thinking about culture, it's important to understand it as the basis for how your brain has developed itself. Because those are the rules that you were given from the time you were born. Hey, don't do this. Hey, do this. You know, don't touch that, touch this. Spend time here, don't spend time there, right? All of those create the rules and structures that your brain then uses to translate the world moving forward. So what else we got? Anything else from that video? Anything that you wanted to talk about, elaborate on?
I like the when she mentioned the new forms of communication. So instead of communication just coming from like a church back in the day, right? Like disseminated, we can now communicate instantly with our phones, share videos, ideologies, food, can be communicated in its own way now. It's no longer just about like a holiday, right? Like, you know, you can go get cake whenever you want, and it's not just for your birthday, right? Or the rich, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I like looking at that stuff. Thought that was pretty cool.
Does
Yeah.
make the world smaller by how quickly we're able to spread information and share culture and appreciate other cultures.
Yeah.
You can DoorDash whatever cultural food you want to your door now. You don't have to leave.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really amazing. Did you have something to say, Dan?
I liked when she talked about the influence of countercultures on the mainstream culture and how it changes over time. And the specific example of like the 1960s counterculture influencing a lot of our politics today on the left, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you're seeing a similar thing happen right now too with counterculture. Because there's still, well, not still, but that psychedelic culture has kind of gone mainstream again. As that counterculture push, especially as we talk about like legalization of substances and things like that, or maybe less about legalization, more about criminalization, because now we're starting to see that all these people are going to prison for years and years and years, and we're going, why? They were smoking weed. Is that really something to imprison somebody for 3 to 5 years? And things like that, where now we're starting to see if the punishment is fitting of that crime. But there's also other counterculture pushes, even with going to war with Iran recently. That's a huge thing. I know, especially for like military veterans, like I don't want anybody to have to go to war again. Like, whatever we can do to prevent war, we should absolutely do our best to do that. Right? And so, even though this is kind of just started, it could turn into more of that Vietnam kind of thing. But yeah. So, thanks for bringing that up. Counterculture.
It's like
It's really important. It provides that balance.
America's culture is so young, and it is the melting pot. Like in the video, she says that is it really a melting pot because it still has a dominant culture, and because it's such a young country, they hold on to some archaic values because it's all they have that is their own because it's a melting pot. Instead of that push of like what you just said of like, does it really fit the crime? Like maybe it did 50 years ago when that was a different value and it was a different society. And it wasn't understood, or and it was quickly to be humanized, but we've shifted, and so should our values.
Yeah.
I was actually having a conversation on the porch the other night, a little political conversation with a guy that was Mexican, and he was trying to make his point about, I guess, America being somehow, I guess, not as good somehow, because he said when in Mexico the culture was so much richer than it is here. And I brought up the same to him. I was like, well, that's because you still brought your culture with you, but there's so many cultures in America. I said in Mexico, it's mostly just that one culture, kind of, right? I said here, you think it's watered down because it's not just Mexican culture here. You've got people from Pakistan, you've got people that are from here, Texans, whatever. You've got people from Asia, you've got all this stuff. And I said, you throw it in there and everybody's culture kind of gets a little washed down and meshed together, but that's what America is.
Yeah.
Like we were going back and forth about that, because he was saying how, like, the people, like, he feels like the younger people from his culture here are softer.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, that might be true, that they're different here, like I think he was like saying like they're spoiled, or like they're living a life that they don't they haven't had the hardships of the culture. The,
Yeah.
you know,
The gratitude and appreciation.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's not
And I
because
was like,
That's the point of every generation is to make life better for the next. Like you wanna make it better for your kids or you, the way you grew up.
yeah, well, and that's, a lot of times in Mexico, you know, their leadership is a rough thing over there sometimes, and over here, it's better sometimes in some ways, and, and you maybe have more opportunity over here at this point than you would maybe wherever he's from. So, yeah, he was kind of arguing with me about that, and I was like, but this is the melting pot, of course it's not gonna be, it could be, it's as rich as you wanna make it, like, if you wanna bring that over here and keep it rich in your house, you can do that in America, you know? If you're choosing to not hold all these little cultural things in your family, it is gonna combine with everything else.
Yeah. Well, and that's again one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about culture, because we are seeing this in real time. We are seeing the, I guess, merging of multiple cultures in real time. Because while, yeah, the US was founded, you know, to be a place to provide refuge to a bunch of different populations of people, for most of US history, they lived separate. Right? Germans created their own town, Italians created their own towns, Koreans, Chinese, they created their own towns. But now, with technology and also just with the population size, because we've grown so much, everything has just spilled into everything else. And so now we're starting to see some of those battles around culture and cultural practices, especially like when we're talking about cultural appropriation. But I think less about cultural appropriation and more about how people are just kind of taking what they like now. Because you can see it anywhere.
Yeah.
You jump on TikTok, see how somebody dresses, how they talk, whatever, how they do their makeup, and you go, I want to do that. And then you can do it. And you may not understand the history of that, and you may not understand like the significance of a practice. But at the same time, I think most people that actually practice those things don't know the significance.
Yeah.
You know, they haven't actually sat with it a lot of times and asked themselves, why do I believe this? What about this is meaningful? And culture is the essence of human connectivity. We here at Elixir have built a culture that we enjoy, and so we come here to experience that culture and connect with people in that way because we like that kind of culture. You know, where you can come and sit down with people and talk and maybe have deep conversations, maybe just have personal conversations, but we have built that culture here that attracts people to this spot and keeps people here.
A point about, you were saying, the Chinese have their area, the
Mhm.
Italians have their towns. They settled in those little regions, and they also reproduced within the community. And there was a cultural shift where it was no longer frowned upon, where you can mesh cultures, you can mesh races.
Races, yeah.
I'm a product of that. And that's where it starts to get muddy, but I think it gets richer too, because I've gotten to experience so many different cultures because of it. Like where I resided, I experienced that culture heavily because that was strongly Vietnamese. My race, my ethnicity is Indian and a white mixture. So it's like a couple decades ago I wouldn't exist. You know?
Yeah.
So that's I would have been hidden, yeah. That is another way how it's been, I don't like word muddy for that one, that's interwoven, mingled, yeah.
Well, and where culture becomes watered down, right? Because you can't just be one thing because you're not one thing.
Exactly.
You know, and you know, I think that's true for most people nowadays. That I mean, no matter where you grew up, you had a culture, and then you were introduced to a different culture by somebody else, a friend, family. I mean, it could have been online, it could have been a TikTok video, it could be whatever, but you're introduced to it. You know, I grew up, I had the opportunity to go to Japan and live in Japan from 14 to 19, and during that time, I adopted a lot of Japanese culture. But I also was a military brat, so I have the military culture too. And the military culture is very specific around respect, and you know people's ranks, you know, like everything is very ordered and structured. And if I fuck up, then that reflects on my dad. Like if I do something on the base, my dad can get in trouble. And so there's responsibility is huge, and that's something that's very different from civilian culture. And what I've experienced after service.
Officer culture, enlisted culture.
Yes.
There's culture of what job you do in the military. Like, are you in aviation? Are you whatever?
Yep. I wore a flight suit my military career. Different culture when you walk around in pajamas all the time. You got your onesie on. So all of these are important because these change how your brain sees the world. Every single rule you have ever been told creates other rules. So, for example, if your mom said, don't be messy, pick up. Don't be messy, pick up. That was one thing that I got in my childhood. Picking up all the time, picking up toys, picking up clothes, everything had to be picked up off the floor, off the floor, off the floor. That translates to a lot of other behavioral patterns though, because it doesn't just go into messiness, it's other things too, like, okay, well, if it's on my desk, it needs to be ordered. You know, if I own it, there needs to be some kind of order to it, right? And so that those simple suggestions as a kid, and obviously there's building upon those, but those end up building into, such a structure where it's like, I come back to the house and there's dirt on the floor and I'm like, the house is dirty, you gotta clean it. Or even when I go to other people's houses, like that's something that my brain just focuses on. It's like, is there stuff on the floor? Right? All because of that one rule. And so all of the cultures that we've been exposed to have exposed us to rules, because I mean, they didn't say as clearly in the video as I would have wanted, but at the end of the day, cultures are rules. There are rules that a group of people agreed to and said, this is what we want normally to occur. And so when somebody violates that, then it feels weird because it's like, well, you're wearing shoes in the house. Why? And they just can't even fathom what is going on in that person's head because they have never known anything outside of that culture. So this is important because any interaction with another human means you are also interacting with their cultures that they have been brought up in, that they've been exposed to, that they have adopted, inherited, whatever it may be. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you really want to understand yourself, you have to understand what cultures have influenced you and how they've influenced you. This is a great discussion.
I think there's a certain level of programming that comes along with that too. And then there are people that have gone against their own culture or like deprogrammed.
Oh yeah. What do they call it? Deconstruction. Like when people are leaving Christianity now, they call it deconstructing because they have to like really deconstruct their beliefs to come to some sort of meaning in this world. Because Christianity is a very
deeply rooted.
Yes, it's a very deeply rooted culture that primarily utilizes like shame or judgment to get you to do what they believe you're supposed to do. And so you have to like break all of that down. And this was hard for me because I left Christianity when I was 26. And that was the hardest thing for me to figure out, because it was like, well, what do I do? What is this life worth living then? If there's not a God that's going to like send me to hell or send me to heaven, then what is all this for? And it really, I mean, I think this is why so many people stay in religions even, because to deconstruct all of that takes a lot of time and effort, but not only that, you have to actually go, wow, maybe I was wrong. Maybe for the last 20 years I believed something that's complete and utter nonsense.
Yeah, really challenges your ego.
It does. And you have to be willing to let go of that part of your ego, and most people I don't think are. They're not introspective enough, nor are they capable enough to realize that holding on to that more is not going to improve their life. And so that part, the deprogramming, deconstructing, and that's essentially what this class is for like helping you understand how you've gotten to this place so that you can work your way backward and go, oh, this is why I do that. Or maybe it's even, oh, this is why that thing triggers me when my partner does this, right? And then you can have a conversation with your partner and go, hey, when you do this, it kind of triggers me. This is something that I need to work on, but I just wanted you to know so that maybe we can work on this together, right?
I would challenge that it's not just thinking, oh, it was nonsense. I would say, I use the different words of maybe like, oh, I was just practicing what I was told and never really thought why I did this in the first place. Because a lot of people are born into a religion that they have to deconstruct from. They follow it because of their family. And maybe they still see it as it has some value, but they never got the opportunity to choose. So it's not only just nonsense. It's just like, oh, I just been doing what I've been told my whole life.
Yeah, or maybe it's the realization that you don't even know why you believe the thing that you
Yeah,
believe.
that.
And that's a scary thing.
When I was kind of the last dance I had with Christianity at the Methodist Church, one of the things that was the most powerful deep dive for me personally was one of the lessons that pastor taught was in the Methodist Church, he said all sin is the same. And I didn't like that. And then I'm like, why does that bother me? Because when I was practicing it, I kind of deep dove into that. Like, I didn't like to think that, like, if I did something like take a piece of gum from a store when I was a teenager, right? I didn't want to think that the person that was a serial killer, that their sin was as bad as my sin. And then it hit me, it was like, it's not about the sin, it's about that I'm using that I committed a lesser sin and my ego is the problem. And I think that is what I see in the religion is people use it as like, I'm superior to you because I'm pure because this is what I believe.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really was a lesson for me when he taught that. It really stuck with me. And I now like that idea that all sin is the same, and in the long run, whether you believe in an entity, like the first day we had this class, it's like you describe what God was to you. I like to think that whatever, it was a big relief to release that judgment of it doesn't matter if that sin was bigger, because that's not my problem.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that was the basis of the thing for me. And that's when I really was like, I'm going on thinking I'm a really good person because I come to church and I follow these rules, and then I'm like, I'm using all this just to make myself feel better, not necessarily to do anything productive with it. I'm like, I went to church today, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a really interesting lesson. That really woke me up.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I would agree to some extent that all sin is the same.
And it's a tough one.
Yeah. As I would just say that it's in how you construct it in your brain. Like, you could break it down to, is this harming others? Is this not? Right? And I think if your sins, if it's producing harm, then all harm is still harm.
The Methodist Church, they don't believe in hell.
Oh, okay.
So that was why it's like, God is a forgiving God, there's no hell, so also does sin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's very different from mine.
Oh, well, that sounds dandy. Let's go. Everyone, we're gonna commit all the sin, get forgiven, let's go.
That was the only church that I stuck with for as long as I have, just because they're very, well, they divided, and I was with the unified part of it, not the global part, because they were very supportive of all races, all lifestyle. The other part separated from the.
Oh, yeah.
So it was the church I found that was the most open.
I like the community of church. That culture
Yes.
part of the community aspect is
That's what kept me
my
going.
favorite part, but we can build those communities outside of
Well, and I have a feeling, although I don't think anybody knows this or could know this, but I have a feeling that culture or that religion actually just stems from culture.
Yeah.
Religion is just a more specialized focus of culture in relation to a higher power, and that's all it is.
There's different subcultures in the religions too.
Yeah.
Every denomination, every sect.
Well, even within the church,
denominations.
there was like the old people meeting, the young people meeting, the women meeting, the
Yeah.
dudes, you know, like each little culture within the culture of the church. So,
Yeah.
If y'all like the structure of in the community of religion but don't like religion, I would try Unitarian.
to do what?
I would try the Unitarian Universalist.
I looked into it. Yeah, I have the Unitarian churches.
Oh yeah, Unitarian. Yeah.
We were gonna go to one. but
We-
it's still, I didn't know about the hymns. We still gotta sing hymns in the one I was looking at. And I was like, that might be true.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Wow.
What
You
is
gotta come to
up?
spirituality class, have a seat.
I'm a little late, but I'm here.
Get over here,
Hey,
we're talking
hey,
about
you made
culture.
it, brother.
Talk about culture.
I know.
This is full of culture.
I know. I
right
told
here.
this dude. I was like, "Man, I'm culture day. You should
So
come."
I was like, I'm pulled up.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah. All right. So I have this video. It's pretty short, and this one's less about discussion, but more about just like let's look at some cultures. So they have 12 different cultural festivals from around the world, and so we'll just kind of watch this and then continue the discussion. And so. Yeah.
You ever heard of bad time travel? Of course not. I just made it up. But it's when you blow.
Immerse yourself in the festive charm of October.
Oktoberfest.
Yeah. All right.
Combos.
So we'll just learn about a bunch of different festivals. I know for me, these are hugely inspiring. I did La Tomatina when I was 25, which is the Tomato Fight Festival in Spain. And it was a blast. I had never experienced anything like that. They came in with dump trucks and just dumped tomatoes in the road, and you just picked them up and started throwing them. I had tomatoes in my ears, in my teeth, I had it in my eyes. It got so into my pants that I had to just throw them away. Because it was just like in my pockets. It was just everywhere. But one of the funnest things I've ever done. I mean, just
It's insane.
mass chaos.
Did you do it too?
Yeah.
Oh, you done it with them?
Yeah, like,
Oh,
I
that's
did it
great.
with my mom actually. Insane. It reminds me of like those like old like battlefields, like thousands and thousands of people. Like the floor must have been covered in tomatoes this thick. Like
Yeah,
I saw
so
people crawling. It was crazy.
yeah, it was so much fun, right? So this is just a way that we can explore some other cultures and maybe even see where some of our culture stem from.
Don't forget to subscribe, smash that like button, and ring the bell, because this is just the beginning of our thrilling adventures together. Let's kick off our adventure in the vibrant heart of Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. Picture this. Streets alive with samba rhythms, flamboyant costumes shimmering in the sunlight, and a celebration that lasts for days. The Carnival of Rio, held every year in early February, is a sensory explosion. a joyful tapestry where locals and travellers dance in harmony. It's not just a festival, it's a way of life. Illuminate your spirit as we journey to India for the enchanting Festival of Lights, Diwali. Celebrated in October or November, this festival transforms homes into radiant displays of glowing diyas and vibrant rangoli. It's a time for love, family, and the triumphant victory of good over evil, filled with laughter, fireworks, and sweet treats that create a magical atmosphere. Raise your steins and immerse yourself in the festive charm of Oktoberfest in Munich. This grand celebration of Bavarian culture typically runs from mid-September to early October. With traditional music, mouth-watering pretzels, and the warmest smiles, you'll feel as if you've stepped into a fairy tale. The laughter and lively ambience create an unforgettable sense of community. Embrace the chill as we uncover the mesmerizing Harbin Ice Festival in China. Taking place every January, this frosty wonderland showcases incredible ice sculptures that dazzle under the night sky. From majestic castles to intricate designs, this festival transforms Harbin into a magical realm, perfect for experiencing the artistry of winter. Get ready for a playful escapade in Spain with the whimsical La Tomatina. Held on the last Wednesday of August, this joyful festival in Banyoles invites you to throw caution and tomatoes to the wind. Picture a vibrant red battlefield filled with laughter and friendly chaos as participants unleash their inner child in this delightful food fight. Prepare to be swept away in a riot of colour at Holi, the festival of colours in India. Celebrated in early spring, this exuberant festival marks the arrival of the season with vibrant powders filling the air and laughter echoing everywhere. It's a celebration of renewal and love, where friends and families unite in joyous dance and heartfelt traditions. Make a splash at Thailand's exhilarating Songkran Festival. This nationwide water fight, celebrated in mid-April, welcomes the Thai New Year with joyous water battles and vibrant street parties. It's a refreshing way to cleanse the past and embrace new beginnings while connecting with the warmth of Thai culture. Journey to Mexico for the beautifully poignant Day of the Dead. Celebrated on November 1st and 2nd, this festival honours loved ones who have passed, with colourful altars adorned with marigolds and sugar skulls. Families come together to share stories, food and laughter, celebrating life's beauty and the bonds that endure beyond time. Let's illuminate the night at the enchanting Lantern Festival in China. Celebrated on the 15th day of the Lunar New Year, this magical event marks the grand finale of the Chinese New Year celebrations. Streets sparkle with stunning lanterns as families gather to solve riddles, savor sweet tanyua, and revel in breathtaking dragon dances. Step into the elegance of Japan's Gion Matsuri, a month-long celebration in Kyoto. Taking place throughout July, this festival showcases magnificent floats, traditional music, and vibrant processions that honor Japan's rich cultural heritage. Each float tells a captivating story, inviting you to experience the warmth and hospitality of the Japanese people. Dive into a world of creativity at the iconic Edinburgh Festival Fringe. Every August, the city transforms into a vibrant stage for artists from every corner of the globe. With thousands of shows spanning comedy, theatre, and everything in between, it's an artistic celebration that fuels inspiration and innovation. Finally, let yourself be enchanted by the timeless allure of the Venice Carnival in Italy. Taking place in early February, this iconic festival is renowned for its extravagant masks and grand masquerade balls. Experience stunning parades and traditional revelry as the city transforms into a magical playground of creativity and romance. What a whirlwind of vibrant celebrations! From the electrifying rhythms of Rio to the serene beauty of the Lantern Festival in China, these 12 festivals are more than just events. They're windows into the heart and soul of diverse cultures. Each one invites you to dance, taste, and connect in unforgettable ways. So, which festival sparked your imagination? Share your
Any festivals stand out to you all?
This might be stupid, but I didn't know like the Lantern Festival was Chinese.
I didn't hear.
Because we have those pop-ups all the time here. They just say Lantern Festival. They don't talk anything about the heritage or the origins, but it's the same concept. And now I feel duped.
It was in Tangled too.
In
She
Tangled,
wasn't
yes.
to China. What the hell?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I think that's why I wanted to do a Lantern Festival
I know.
because of Tangled.
Yeah. Yeah. So which festival stood out to you guys? What resonated with you?
I like the color festival.
Yeah.
Never done that, but based off that, like, I think that bring a lot of peace to the world is, you know, a day of just mess with colors, art, dancing, music, foods, everyone just getting together. And one thing I noticed was almost every culture had some version of a rainbow. You know, like it was just all colors
Yeah.
together. I really like all of that. That's super cool.
I'm always drawn to David. I'm always drawn to that one.
I like Diwali because I grew up kind of sometimes celebrating it, but just a day of just remembering a light over dark. Just having that gratitude for that day and just being with family.
That's so supposed to be fun. I like Oktoberfest because it's like a month. You know what I mean? Like a weekend is cool. But a month of just, you know, whatever they do over there, that's what I look for. I'm sure that's not the only one. That's what's cool.
Yeah,
It's a long time.
Dance and beer and food.
Yeah.
A lot of those festivals, they celebrate with food. And it's part of it. Like even Day of the Dead, I made the London Muertos before, but they're kind of making it. It's fun to make the foods of it to help feel connected, but like you said, when does it get fuzzy about cultural appropriation? Because we like to celebrate with people like this experience other cultures through these festivals. But when do we pass that line of appropriating it and saying this is
Well, I'm drawn to Day of the Dead too because I feel like a lot of these cultural things are focusing on remembering your past and where you came from and remembering your ancestry, right?
Yeah.
And American white people don't really have that, right? So when we celebrate and we have our friend, I put my family on there and I remember them. Like, I'm Mormon, so we probably go back to Columbus. No, I know we go back to like Charlemagne in England or whatever.
Wow.
So my family's researched all back, but I go back really far and print out those pictures and I put them out there because I love that idea of showing appreciation for where I came from.
Yeah.
And as an American, we don't really have anything that celebrates that.
Yeah.
But most of these other cultures do show reverence to their ancestry. And I also like the fact that
Absolutely.
when I'm gone, maybe somebody will be doing that and thinking about my craziness, you know? So,
Right on, dude.
right? That's why the big thing now is to like get cremated and spread your ashes somewhere. But there was, and I think that's the better way to go probably, but this last couple of years we went to Idaho where I was from, and we went to the cemetery where all my family's buried. And there was something about being able to visit them, you know? There was something there, and I'm like, the thing about getting cremated is there's nowhere to go unless you put a like unless you go to where they spread their ashes or they put a headstone somewhere but their body's not there.
Yeah.
There's like,
Well, I love the new traditions that are coming out. Like one of them is like you can get a special, I think it's a pouch, but you plant a tree in it,
yes.
and then you plant that
Yeah.
tree, and so
I like
that ancestor
Because I agree,
returns
like
into that tree.
cemeteries are kind of stupid, like those bodies stacking up and all that. It's kind of wasteful, the land to be used for.
embalming, the whole
Yeah, the whole
profit
thing.
of
Yeah,
funerals.
I get it.
It's like the meeting we talked about was it death? How
Yeah.
it's so far removed from our society now. It's like the graveyards that I've been to, where either friends or family are at, it's like they're so far away from me that I don't think about necessarily the graveyard or going and visiting or anything like that. In our society, we just always try to push away the death, right? Like, it's just, at least in America, it's,
Yeah.
you don't see it as often as some of these other cultures in Mexico where they celebrate their ancestors.
Yes.
Yeah.
At least in my life, I've never done that. Other than like at a bar, like a toast to a friend that passed away or something. And I thought that was pretty cool.
And like I said, being Mormon,
Hey, what up, man?
they do genealogy. So like they do research, like some of the people are in charge of researching where you came from, all of that and stuff. But I was kind of okay with that being raised that way. So I really appreciate, but they don't really celebrate it like some of these other cultures do. Celebrate the ancestry and the history of we had Pioneer Day.
Yeah.
That was not that exciting.
I kind of ran into that Songkran festival by accident when I went to Thailand, and then I went again when I learned about it.
Yeah.
And the reason I liked it was because I didn't know anything about it. So like when I was there the first time, it was just kind of like a big water fight, and then that's all I thought of it. It was just like a party with a water fight. But then I met people there, and then they like explained it to me more, and it's all about like it's like kind of like their new year and like their cleansing of like getting rid of like the bad shit and stuff that like they went through in that year, and kind of like a reset. So once I kind of understood that more, the second time I went, it was a little bit like it was a lot more cool for me. Like
Yeah.
it was so much better. Like, and it was like I think I even enjoyed it more. Like, it was like because it's everywhere. Like there's no streets that like the firemen are out. Like they're putting water on people. Like if you don't like getting wet, stay in the house. Like it's like that. So that one was really cool.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So, according to positive psychology, it's good for people to think about death and kind of come to terms with it like existentially. So, the Day of the Dead is good for that, but also people don't visit the graveyards enough to the point where some people came up with this game called Tombstone Hold'em, where you go and you play like a version of Texas Hold'em in the graveyard just to kind of increase people going to graveyards. But it was really controversial because people are like, well, that's disrespectful. But other people are like, okay, well, you are bringing attention to the graves and like noticing them.
Yeah, you bring in life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, in general, America has done a really bad job, so to, what a few of you have said, about even broaching the topic of death.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it usually comes through, like, your goldfish died, and that's, like, the extent of our discussion with death, is like, okay, you had a pet that died, but there's not a real discussion about, okay, well, how do we prepare for death? Because we all know it's coming. Like, we all know that. We're not going to live forever. No matter how much money you have, no matter how much time you had, eventually you will die. Even if there were ways to extend your life, like eventually that will run out somehow, some way. And so even just having conversations about it, or celebrating it, starts to change your interpretation or engagement with that thing. So it's no longer, oh my gosh, death, it's so scary, and where are we going to go, and all these things, to, wow, that was my great aunt, and she did this. Wow, that is so cool. I feel inspired by that person, right? It's a whole different shift in how your brain constructs an understanding of death, from something that is scary and that you don't want and that you should run away from and never talk about, to something that is like, wow, you can leave a mark on people for generations even after you pass, and that you can still celebrate or be part of that, and that us today are really should be celebrating the shit that our ancestors have gone through.
Well,
Go ahead.
well, when we talked about death, and I said how I deal with death was like I don't know how to really say like you can keep that person alive because you're through you. Like I know that's not what somebody wants to hear right away, but like I would listen to the songs my grandma liked. I would cook her favorite meals. It made me feel connected because she lived through me. But that's in essence what Day of the Dead is. When you build the altar, you put their favorite things on the altar and the symbolism that they're coming to visit. But really, you're just keeping them alive in their memory alive because you're doing the things and giving and gifting the things that they like. So it's like just a designated day for that kind of respect to that person.
And I've come to the conclusion that one way to keep yourself alive is through food. Because when I went through my mom's, when she had to move into a facility and I was going through things and I got her recipe books and files and stuff, I had a treasure trove. I had great-great-grandma Welker's sugar cookies that she was famous for. I had Aunt Edith's banana cookies. I had all these things, and it's like the banana cookies in particular, I didn't really even know Aunt Edith very well.
Don't gatekeep any of those
But,
recipes
some of you don't want, there's some weird jello shit going on here that I'm not interested in. But those people, as long as somebody doesn't get greedy and change it to their own recipe because it's just damn good, they're gonna live on in the food. And food was in all of those festivals, right?
Yeah.
The tradition of food. So it's like Aunt Edith's banana cookies have gone through 4 generations now. So every time, and in my cookbook, I printed it out and I put just a little picture of her next to the recipe. So like when you make them, you can see who she was, or my great grandma Welker.
Yeah.
So it's like you can be remembered if you come up with a recipe and put your name on it, and you'll have really selfish relatives that take your recipe, be like, oh, I remember Grandma Welker, what was she like? And you have to have that conversation when you make the sugar cookies, which I make every Christmas.
I didn't have like any baking, as somebody who loves baking and former baker. I didn't have any passed down to me, so I started like compiling other people's great grandma's recipes, and they would give them to me, and it would feel like such an honor. So like you're trusting me with your great aunt's orange cookies, like you know that they're like, yeah, we never shared this outside the family, and I'm like, I feel like a family now. So can I get those banana cookies?
Yeah. With cream cheese icing.
And so that's maybe the most important thing about culture, right? Even as we're talking about this, we are building connections, we're actually unifying. Even in just talking about culture and talking about sharing cookies and talking about going to the water festival and talking about doing these things, it starts to bring us together versus creating division. And this is what culture, I believe, is supposed to do, is really culture is the rules that help us unify and say, these are what our culture values and how we want to view the world or organize ourselves around the world. Because eventually, I mean, we're already pretty much there, where you can just hop on a plane and be in a whole different country with a whole different rules and culture in a day. But, you know, in the future, it's going to be quicker and quicker and sooner, and you're going to have a lot more access to those different cultures, and all these cultures are going to blend together. And at some point, we will have a unifying culture across the whole world, if not already. I mean, Western culture has kind of dominated the rest of the world, which has not been necessarily good, nor unifying, because it's, you know, circles all around capitalism and how can we get you to buy stuff. But out of that, we have benefited a lot. I mean, from things like Japanese culture has bled into a lot of like American corporations because of how they think about doing like, I went down to the Toyota factory here in Texas a few years ago, and they use a whole Japanese system to run the American Toyota factory. Even though Toyota is obviously a Japanese company, the Americans run it just like that. And so they use Kanban boards, which are, you know, it's just a series of boards. They use the Lean Six Sigma model, which actually came from Japan and talks about how you improve processes and all these things. And so we're seeing these blends, not just in like our joyous celebrations of culture, but even in how we work.
Yeah.
It's like getting into our workplaces, these different kinds of cultures. And so it is important to what Sam was saying earlier about knowing where that line is, because we talk about cultural appropriation, and that's something that's really difficult for me to grasp because I have experienced so many cultures and I've adopted and adapted to so many cultures. And if I went out and wore a kimono or something, like I would feel like in my heart, I would feel like this is appropriate for me because I love Japan so much and I appreciate the culture so much. But I can be walking down the street and the Japanese person would be like, look at this dude. what is he doing wearing a kimono? Like, doesn't he know? Maybe I'm wearing the belt wrong or something like that too.
So it could
Right.
be disrespectful.
And it could come off disrespectful with them not knowing how I actually feel about culture. So I do have a video about cultural appropriation because I think that that's part of this conversation, but I also think it's part of understanding ourselves. If we are basically an amalgamation of cultures have shaped our brain structure, they've shaped how we think, how we feel, how we behave in this world. We should also know when those violations occur to our culture, right? Because that's essentially when you are triggered because somebody did something that's counter to your culture, right? You did something I wasn't expecting you to do, and it offends me that you did that. Like, let's say you put you're in a Middle Eastern country, you put your feet on the table. Showing the bottom of your feet in many Middle Eastern countries is extremely offensive, right? And so you may do that, just putting your feet up on the table, not even thinking of it. That other person across from you is like, oh my God, their feet are on the table. What the fuck do they think they're doing? Like, they're going through that whole process, right? You just got triggered. Why? Because somebody violated your culture. And this is where understanding your brain as a system of organization, that's what your brain is doing. It is organizing the information that you experience every single day. And it is highlighting information that you keep revisiting through your thoughts. And that makes it happen more and more. So the more you revisit memories, the more your brain's gonna go, we should revisit these memories. But it builds itself around culture. The rules that you were born with, the rules that people told you, all those things. But knowing how they can be violated is important because that's how you emotionally regulate yourself. To know, okay, this person's violating that rule, I feel uncomfortable, I don't like this feeling, but maybe they don't know that I feel this way about that, about feet on the table. And now all of a sudden you can de-stress yourself. By actually identifying it and going, okay, this is bothering me, but I'm not going to let it affect me. Now all of a sudden you are curbing your fight or flight response. So if you ever really want to get control of your stress, knowing the rules in which your brain is built is fundamental. So this is a kind of a 10-minute video. I haven't watched the whole thing. I don't think we really need to watch the whole thing, but at least get a brief kind of understanding.
Good. Just saw my friend's baby.
9 Friday, bro. 9. It's our best deal.
The teacher takes her to break her. Like I said, I'm doing
I'm gonna get that YouTube.
Beliefs. This is how people use data. Two good examples are the concept of a shared faith or patriotism. Both have a fixed set.
Oops, let's go back to. We'll start.
The winner is Marlon Brando in the boat.
On March 27, 1973, Apache and Yaqui actress and activist Sacheen Littlefeather ascended the stage at the Academy Awards. Amidst a mixture of cheers and boos from the evening's attendees, Littlefeather read a portion of a prepared statement on behalf of that year's Best Actor winner, Marlon Brando. She declined the award on Brando's behalf, stating his reason for turning his back on Hollywood's highest honor, the movie industry's continued misrepresentation of Native American people in film. Littlefeather was there in his stead to draw attention to the American Indian movement and to shine light on the issue of cultural appropriation in film. Cultural appropriation. Although the phrase and the practices it describes are familiar to most of us, it can feel ambiguous. And that's primarily because while inappropriate or offensive uses of other cultures are often quite obvious, the subtleties of the conversation are usually drowned out by protest that appreciation cannot be appropriation. The actual phrase cultural appropriation first appeared in print in 1945 and is attributed to the late Professor Arthur E. Christie, and it's been a topic of very heated debate ever since. As a term, cultural appropriation has its roots in the latter half of the 20th century, with its highest usage coming after 1980, although the concept of stealing or misusing a culture was on our collective radar from the 19th century onwards. And marginalized groups have been speaking up against cultural appropriation that either diminishes or sidelines the contributions of the people who created certain practices. But at the heart of these conversations are three daunting and often amorphous concepts. First, what even is culture? How does power operate in relationship to culture? And what are the boundaries between participating versus appropriating another culture? So before we get into the debate of whether or not culture can be appropriated and misused, we should start with the basics, namely, what is culture? Well, as a cultural historian myself, I'm going to tip my hat to 20th century theorist Raymond Williams' 1976 definition of culture. According to Williams, our modern use of culture exists largely under three main umbrellas. First, there are the intellectual and spiritual and aesthetic development realms of culture that encompass shared ideologies and beliefs. This is probably the least tangible portion of culture. Two good examples are the concept of a shared faith or patriotism. Both have a fixed set of values and ideas attached to them and can inspire cultural production. But they are also ideologies that exist even if they aren't being actively enacted. So you can feel patriotism even when you're not actively performing a ritual that displays it. Just like you can experience shared faith even when you're not engaging in religious ceremonies. Then there's a portion of culture that covers the shared way of life of a defined group of people, meaning the way that a fixed group interacts and lives in accordance with their common ideologies. This can be very specific, like the shared lifestyle of one finite group of people, or extremely expansive, like a shared reality that extends between all of humanity. So as far as we know, all humans share the earth. All humans, in order to survive, must eat. But the way we live on Earth, whether in a large city or in a rural community, is defined by the people we are directly engaging with on a daily basis. And the third and final category of culture that Williams describes, and the one we'll talk about the most today, is related to shared creative and artistic productivity. This includes the art, literature, music, films, songs, and general representation of a given culture or group of people. Cultural production is the most concrete portion of culture because it gives us objects, and often physical items to look at and engage with. So although this all may seem a bit dense, it's helpful to think about culture like a series of concentric circles radiating outward from the center, and you're the center. In the first circle are the things closest to us, like ideologies, because they exist largely in our minds. Then we have shared ways of life, or things that we engage in with people directly around us. And in the farthest circle is cultural production, or the objects, artworks, and creations that express our culture and that we shuttle out into the world. And being farthest away from the center, that's also the sphere most prone to traveling far away from its original context and therefore being taken up elsewhere. And now that we've briefly waded through the waters of what exactly culture is, you've probably found the underlying connective tissue of these three spheres. Namely, that culture is shared and big and constantly occurring. Plus, it's a bit like language because it needs a collective of people to make a shared meaning. So often when people argue against the existence of cultural appropriation, the basis of the argument is centered on culture's shared nature, since something that is shared isn't owned by one particular person. But there's a weakness in this argument of ownership that stems from the way we think about possession. Some forms of ownership are rather straightforward and therefore easier to understand. If you go out and purchase a car, you have sole ownership of the car and are entitled to all of its benefits, like faster and more convenient transportation, in addition to all of its drawbacks, like pesky car repairs. But ownership of culture doesn't operate that way because it belongs to a group that the culture stems from and not one discrete person or persons. And as Professor Susan Scafidi notes in her book, Who Owns Culture, there are legal challenges when thinking of discrete ownership in relationship to cultural products. Legal protections like copyright or trademarking rely on a stable cultural product with a set number of creators, like a song with a fixed list of songwriters. But culture is constantly evolving and changing. So Scafidi warns that patenting an idea that is shared among a group may provoke ossification of a culture and its artifacts. But despite the difficulty of codifying cultural ownership in legal terms, there are ways that culture can be appropriated or misused once it's divorced from its original context. People who are against believing that cultural appropriation even exists often say that America is a melting pot of various cultures, and therefore no one should be allowed to lay ownership to any particular form of expression. As Scafidi also notes, indeed, the tension-filled history of American immigration and even internal migration indicates that the cultural products of others are often easier to accept and assimilate than the individuals or huddled masses themselves. And that's because people's admiration for the cultural products they consume, like art, music, literature, and fashion, can exist quite separately from the real-world treatment of the people whose culture they're appropriating from. Because at the heart of cultural appropriation isn't just a cultural object, but power. Appropriation happens when you have a position of power or a member of a dominant culture who's able to take the parts of a marginalized culture that you enjoy, divorce them from their original meaning, and use them for entertainment value without considering their original context or having to deal with the negative ramifications that someone from that culture would have to deal with as a result of that same action. So while it may seem benign to the person who's extracting and enjoying the culture, the resulting damage can have real-world implications for the people whose culture has been misrepresented or misused. So let's return to the 1973 Academy Awards. Although in large part Sacheen Littlefeather's disruption of the ceremony and Marlon Brando's absence were meant to draw attention to the specific issue of Native American representation in film, the longer statement that the actor released after the broadcast pointed to larger cultural issues. Brando wrote in the full statement that was published in newspapers after the ceremony that his decision wasn't only about the movies being made and the way that Native American cultures had been appropriated and distorted, but also the real-world issues that arose from this systematic mischaracterization. Of Littlefeather's appearance at the award show, he wrote, "Perhaps at this moment you're saying to yourself, what the hell has all this got to do with the Academy Awards? Why is this woman standing up here ruining our evening, invading our lives with things that don't concern us, and that we don't care about?" I think the answer to those unspoken questions is that the motion picture community has been as responsible as any for degrading the Indian and making a mockery of his character, describing him as savage, hostile, and evil. It's hard enough for children to grow up in this world. When Indian children watch television and they watch films, and when they see their race depicted as they are in films, their minds become injured in ways we can never know. Brando also noted that at the time the 1973 Oscars were occurring, the town of Wounded Knee, South Dakota had been occupied by American Indian Movement members who were met with military forces. The town also has historical significance because it's the site of the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890, where an estimated 150 to 300 Lakota Sioux were killed by US troops. So the decision to represent Native American cultures in movies as inherently violent and untamable also served as a way of appropriating culture and misaligning history. To Littlefeather and Brando's point, the pleasure American audiences got from watching old westerns didn't outweigh the damage caused by cultural appropriation and misrepresentation. So, what do you think? Have anything to add to this theoretical minefield? Any other details and stories to tack onto this winding road? Drop those comments down below since I'll be following along and answering some of them. And this video is evidence of that because I have to give a shout out and a thank you to Rico Fly on YouTube, who asked after our episode on tattooing if I could cover the history of cultural appropriation. I hope I answered some of your questions here today and that you guys liked the video. And if you guys want to keep...
Okay. So that one may have actually done a better job of really outlining culture in relation to how it imposes itself on us. I like the 3 different quadrants that she provided: ideologies, shared ways of life, and then the broader cultural impacts. But what came out for you guys? What
The
thoughts were percolating?
they showed like I think it was from The Simpsons. That plagued my childhood. A poop and being asked if my dad owned a gas station, or when people saw how light I was because I was mixed, or like, are you dot or feather? Like those things just so annoying as a child, annoying as an adult, guys. To discuss this, like, I mean, I guess I'm not dark enough for you to see that I am Indian, or just to see the culture that as a kid made me feel like I should be ashamed of being Indian because I was asked those things, or did you live in a hut, or did you eat cockroaches? Like the stupidest shit that kids say, you know? But because this is what they saw on TV.
Yeah.
I think that's the worst part, because like it's more so than it affecting like you, because it's your culture, and you know somebody is doing cultural appropriation on your culture. It's what's putting in the minds of other people that's gonna make them want to judge you, right? Because they're just watching the shit. They're just like, oh, well, that must be what it is. That's how Indian people are, and that's how Mexicans are. So I think that's the part that is more damaging, because it's putting that ideology in other people's heads that don't know anything about the culture, that is gonna make them talk and react and feel some type of way about somebody else's culture that they have no idea about.
Yeah.
So I think that part is even worse than somebody just doing something when they maybe like don't really, not trying to be cultural, like how you mentioned, like they're wearing the kimono, but like how you know how you feel about it. Like you weren't doing it because you know you're trying to make fun of somebody. You're doing it because you feel something within the culture.
Yeah.
But I feel like that part is way more damaging than anything else. You know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and sometimes we can unwittingly do that ourselves, not realizing that, like, let's say I did wear the Japanese kimono, but maybe I did it in such a way that made other people go, what a weird thing. Why would anybody do that? That's so weird. I can't believe people would wear that.
I think it's like weaponizing. I think it's weaponizing. Like, if you look at American culture, how do we get a large group of people to get rid of something, right? Or stand in the form, like, whoever's in power, like, if it's these old white males that own these companies, they're gonna use people and their cultures and weaponize it, right? Like, the Indians are savages.
Yeah.
They're not, right? Like, but that's what they're gonna feed to people to get
Fit
them.
their narrative, yeah.
And I'm like, I see it, especially like going around the world and seeing certain things. It's like our communities get weaponized so we can take over other places, and I don't want to support that. I don't like that. You know? So
I mean, shit. We even saw that a little bit last year with, they're eating cats and dogs. It's just another example of that. You attach this idea to a bunch of people that is completely untrue, but now people view them as that. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't know there were immigrants out there that were eating cats and dogs. There's a good portion of people that believe that now. Pete.
Oh, this sheep little feather thing is interesting because it's like such a huge, people how like a huge cultural moment, but it's also looked into her ancestry. There's a good chance that she didn't have any ancestry related to like Mexican Native American tribes at all. She was just a Mexican lady who dressed up as an American. So that's kind of, I think, what makes her so important, so famous, because either way, like she's either this actress who spoke Marlon Brando at the Oscars, or she's like the walking, talking, breathing example of cultural appropriation. Either way, she's a state figure. I double check those lines, looking at these things, not for deep research at all, but there's a small chance that she's actually legit. Most people like interviewed her sisters and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, we have more modern
her headdress is growing up.
Yeah, and we have modern day examples of that too. I know. Oh God, what was her name? Michelle, something. That white lady that was passing herself off as a black person.
Rachel Dolezal.
Rachel,
yeah, she's the same thing. She's like,
Get elected to the NAACP.
And shared
huge celebrity.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Native American.
Yeah, which is You know, I have, and this is where it gets to that line of, okay, is it cultural appropriation or is it appreciation? Because, I mean, to claim that you're an ancestor of black people is just a weird thing, but wanting to be black, and so you maybe style your hair in those ways, maybe you darken your skin in those ways, I don't know if that's as problematic. If you're doing it to hurt other people, okay. You know, I think that's a line that we can draw. Anytime, like, what you are doing is causing harm in whatever way, reputational harm, societal harm, physical harm, like, we should avoid that. But if it's just like I mean, y'all see me. Sometimes I wear lots of different makeup and stuff. I'll do kind of Egyptian style makeup or whatever. You know, whatever I'm feeling. I'll just draw dots on my head and, you know, do all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's honest. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But if somebody looked at it, they could say, well, that comes from my tribes, right? So it's hard for me to really find that line when we're talking about something like Rachel, because wanting to be black and appreciating black culture and black people, and so you kind of mirror yourself off of that, is, I'm okay with that. Now, if you're going around saying that you're an African American and you're on TV, you know, like, I'm a mixed person, now we're into that harm place, because you are absolutely taking something and trying to call yourself something that you absolutely aren't. So you're introducing a lie that only just muddies the water. But it gets harder. I don't know if you remember, like, a couple of years ago, there was that young lady that went viral because she wore a traditional Chinese, I don't know what they call them, dress, to prom. And somebody was like, you're totally appropriating this culture. And it went viral and it was all over the news and stuff like that. But I wonder if she actually was. Now, she was mocking the Chinese culture wearing that dress. But if she looked at it and was like, this is a beautiful dress. I love this dress. Like, I don't care if it's Chinese or Nigerian or, you know, Honduran. Like, I don't care. Like, I like the dress. I want to wear this to prom. That's different. But see, this is where that line, and these are lines in your own head too. So just keep in mind, like, you have these lines in how your brain has constructed your reality, where it will go, I think you're crossing that line, or this may be that, or it may be the other thing. We all have those lines somewhere in our head of what will trigger us, what won't. But knowing how we get to those lines is important. What up, Gary?
I think the video was really good, but I feel like it was very like muddy in the line of cultural appropriation and just like straight up racism.
Yeah.
Like, that's a good. I feel like my definition growing up of cultural appropriation is like misrepresentation or misrepresented appreciation of a culture. So I feel like most of the people that do cultural appreciation like the culture that they're appreciating, like appreciating, but they might have overstepped by just not being educated enough.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like examples that they gave, like blackface, that's like just racism.
Yeah,
or
that's
even
just
the citizens thing, that's kind of
just racism.
It is.
Yeah. I can see that.
I guess it's appropriation for Homer, like the character that they made, because Homer is just made to be like a dumb. Yeah, so he doesn't know better.
Midwestern guy.
Yeah. But the show, people that made the show.
Yeah, but I think on that Simpsons episode, he comes out with that attire, and the people, like, they were not pleased with him. Like, he wasn't being like, they were calling him like, this is not appropriate, right? Like, the reactions from the people, they weren't like, ha 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 ha. They weren't laughing at it like funny Simpsons. They were like,
Is in its own form to show,
Yeah.
like, in a cartoon of the cartoon characters, no, we don't like how you're representing our culture, and the total understanding of like it's okay if you want to wear a turban, that's awesome, but do you know why you're wearing that headdress, right? Like, do you support that, and are you wearing it, and now are you going against the culture in some sort of like racist, overwhelming way, right? Like, there needs to be some love and some support when you take on that culture.
I think I feel like there's like 3 different categories. They have like the cultural appropriation of like what I said, when people appreciate the culture but not being educated on it. And then they have like the whole left side of like just being a racist. And then I think there's like normalization of like comedy within like, oh, we're being funny, we're like this,
it's just
it's not serious.
Yeah.
And it's like that third part.
Where does Kim Kardashian's braids lay and all that? Because I was curious about that.
There's a lot of argument about fox braids.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because they themselves didn't want to show a white person with braids, right? Because that's the thing, it's like, we shouldn't be so scared to call it out as a culture of America itself. It's like, we should all understand that if you're a white individual with braids and you're not appreciating their culture and part of that culture, then of course you're misrepresenting their culture and even making fun of it and trying to benefit from them in their culture. You know what I mean?
So what about, like, my friend, when I was in California, went on her honeymoon to Jamaica,
See?
right? And one of the things that they do is come back with the cornrows, right? Like, they were like, come, pay for this, get this done. And then she came back, and whatever, I didn't think about
They have a
it.
word for that.
But is that okay? Like,
You
she
know,
was in Jamaica
their
and they did
culture,
it?
when white people come to their country to get braids,
Yeah.
don't know the actual word, we can fact check it, but it's like you're not accepting their culture. They're doing it to make money because of the poor country in that area, and they want to spread their culture by showing their
Yeah.
belief in their word.
So I don't think, I didn't feel like she was being disrespected. She actually, she was in a interracial relationship. So, I didn't even think about it. And that she came back, I was like, oh, you were in Jamaica.
I feel like you should keep doing it from then on, like, go get braids every other week, and then,
Probably.
that's I think the fine line, because they are trying to capitalize off of it, but also share their culture by offering it to tourists, it's a tourist trap type of thing. But if she's like, hell yeah, I'm gonna get box braids now I'm gonna do this, every other week, that's gonna be
See, that's where I find cultural appropriation to be the most offensive. So I think you made some good points, Gary. A lot of the examples for cultural appropriation in the video were actually really examples of racism.
Yeah.
You could say that maybe they appropriate some culture in like that scene with The Simpsons, but ultimately I think like the worst part of cultural appropriation is taking something, saying it's yours, and then selling it. So my biggest frustration around that is with yoga. Because yoga in the Hindu tradition is very specific. Like they have books written with like rules and structure and songs and chants and a whole bunch of other stuff that go along with yogic practices. And when it was brought to the United States, even the people that brought it here, though, the Indians that brought it here, were not like. See, they were actually appropriating their own tradition.
Yeah, he was an Indian
like,
man,
just
he
pimping
was a
it out.
yogi, but he was like, I know what I'm doing here, I'm gonna sell it to the white women.
That's the thing where the money, like it gets weaponized. Like, I see it, and I like to take a step back and look at it like, okay, how am I being manipulated?
Yeah. But for me, that is the biggest example of like cultural appropriation and the worst part of it, because once you do something, like now it's practiced all over the United States, like everybody knows yoga. They at least have a general idea of what it is. Many people have tried it, but they absolutely have no idea of the relation between yoga and Hindu practices. They have no idea. And that is the biggest harm for cultural appropriation, because not only did you muddy the understanding of what it is, you watered it down to such a degree that people have no idea. They just think it's stretching. And
That's
it's
what I
not.
thought it was. So.
Yeah, yeah.
They relabeled all the poses so you can pronounce them.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Downward dog, they got it. That's not
Yeah, all,
It's like
Shut
white
up.
people taco night.
Yeah, wait till talking about
yeah.
They watered down the tacos for white people tacos.
Do you think that Americans appropriate their own cultures within like just the American culture?
What do you mean?
What is
Like,
the American?
For example, if you're from Texas, you dress like a cowboy.
oh yeah.
And now you live in New York, or you're from New York, and now you want to dress like a cowboy in New York. Like, would you consider that cultural appropriation? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think it's looked at it that often. You know what I'm saying? Maybe, but like I think it's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, especially if you're like a New Yorker and you're just like, look at me,
Right.
I'm a Texan. You know, you got your big old
Yeah.
belt buckle on, and you're just like, woo ha!
Yeah.
You know,